What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another one from every team video. In this one, we are going to be going over the best contract currently from all 32 NHL teams. A couple of things I should mention before we get started. Pretty straightforward, but to qualify for my list, players must at least be signed through next season. Also, players that are on LTIR and will likely never play again will not be included, like Carey Price for an example. And it goes without saying, but entry-level contracts will not be included either. If you guys enjoy these one from every team videos and you want to see more in the near future, then be sure to leave this video a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help with the videos a ton. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and kick things off with the Anaheim Ducks, and my pick for their best contract currently is Frank Vatrano, who only has 1 year left but has a very team-friendly cap hit of just $3.65 million, an absolute bargain for a guy who just had a career year with the Ducks, was one of the few players on the roster to play in all 82 games, and he led the team in goals with 37 and points with 60, both of which were new career highs for Frank Vatrano. I'll be interested to see what the Ducks decide to do with Frank Vatrano. If they aren't planning on signing him to an extension, then you can bet Frank Vatrano is going to be one of the more higher profile names on the trade market next season. The Boston Bruins are up next, and I feel like you can go a couple of different ways with this one. They have a ton of fantastic contracts, but my pick for the best value currently is Pavel Zacha, who still has 3 more years left at a cap hit of just $4.75 million. Over these last couple of seasons, Pavel Zacha has really blossomed into a legit top 6 center for the Boston Bruins. One of my biggest concerns about the Boston Bruins heading into this season was the center depth. After Bergeron and Krejci retired, I wasn't so sure how far a team with Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha as the number 1 and 2 centers would be able to go, but both Zacha and Charlie Coyle stepped up in a big way this season and definitely played a big role in the success the Bruins had. The Buffalo Sabres are up next, and I'm definitely going with Alex Tuch for their best contract, and not only do I feel like he has the best contract currently on the Sabres, I would even go as far as saying over these last few seasons, I feel like he's had one of the bigger bargain deals in the entire league. Still 2 more years left for Alex Tuch at a cap hit of just $4.75 million. Production-wise, took a bit of a step back this season, but I mean, who on the Sabres didn't? Tuch was still able to finish this season with 22 goals and 59 points in 75 games. I'm a big fan of his game, and clearly the Sabres are too. They use him in pretty much every situation, all around just a very productive player. Next up, we have the Calgary Flames, and for their best contract, I'm actually going to go with Mackenzie Weegar, who still has 7 years left at a cap hit of just $6.25 million. In the later years of this contract, 4, 5, 6 years from now, will this still be looked at as a good deal? I'm not so sure. It all depends on how Weegar's game ages, but right now, in my opinion, the Flames are getting a fantastic value with Weegar on this current contract. Weegar just had a great season with the Flames, continued to play elite level defense in tough top pairing minutes, which is kind of what we've came to expect from Weegar throughout his career, but along with that elite level defense, this season we saw a big uptick in Weegar's offensive production. 52 points in 82 games, 20 of which were goals. The only defenseman in the NHL this season with more goals than Weegar, Cale Makar and Roman Josi, and none of Weegar's offensive production came at the expense of his defense and everything else he does on the ice. Weegar actually became the first player in NHL history this season to block 200 shots and score 20 goals in a single season. Moving along now to the Carolina Hurricanes, my pick for their best contract currently is going to be the captain, Jordan Staal, who has 3 more years left at a cap hit of just $2.9 million. At 35 years old, Staal is probably not a guy who's going to be pushing 20 goals or scoring upwards of 40 points in a single season anymore, but he is still one of the absolute best shutdown centermen in the entire league. He was nominated for the Selke Trophy this year as the league's best defensive forward, along with Austin Matthews and Barkov, who ended up winning the Selke. Jordan Staal is also one of the best face-off men in the entire league as well. He won over 58% of his draws this season. Despite not being up there amongst the leading scorers on the Carolina Hurricanes, still such an important piece for that team, and he is still able to chip in a bit of offense here and there. Had 10 goals and 30 points this past season, but realistically, any offense from Jordan Staal is a bonus at this point for the Carolina Hurricanes. His job is to go out there and shut down the opposing team's top players, and he does that very well. Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks, and this may be a little bit of a hot take for some people, but my pick for their best contract is Alex Vlasic, who next season will be entering the first year of a 6-year deal that carries an annual cap hit of just $4.6 million. Is there risk involved signing a guy who's only played 1 full NHL season to a 6-year deal? Definitely, but the 1 full season that we've seen from Alex Vlasic was very good, playing top 4 minutes on a brutal Chicago Blackhawks team. Alex Vlasic finished with 16 points in 76 games, but the most impressive aspect of his game was the defensive side of things, and on the penalty kill, this is a guy who didn't look like a rookie, very comfortable in his own end. Alex Vlasic is a massive dude, but skates really well and uses his long reach effectively to cut off passing lanes, and I think that's what made him probably the Chicago Blackhawks' best penalty killer this season. In my opinion, if Alex Vlasic doesn't even get much better than how good he was this past season, $4.6 million is still pretty fair. But at just 22 years old, I think it's safe to assume that Alex Vlasic is just scratching the surface, and he's only going to continue to get better. This is a guy that is going to be a staple on the Blackhawks blue line for a very long time, and I don't think it's going to be long before this contract is looked at by most as an absolute bargain for the Blackhawks. The Colorado Avalanche are up next, and this is an easy one for me. It's got to be Cale Makar, who has 3 years left at a cap hit of $9 million. Now, $9 million, still a pretty high cap hit. I think it's the highest cap hit of any player that we're going to talk about in this video, but for Cale Makar, that is an absolute steal, and in my opinion, one of the best contracts in the NHL. Cale Makar is a generational talent, and I think when it's all said and done, he's going to go down as one of the best defensemen in NHL history, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that when his current contract is up 3 years from now, his next contract is likely going to make him, if not the highest paid player, one of the highest paid players in the entire league. Moving along now to the Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm definitely going with the captain, Boone Jenner, who has 2 years left at a cap hit of just $3.75 million. Over these last few years, Boone Jenner, I would say, has definitely been the most consistent forward on the Columbus Blue Jackets. 3 consecutive 20-plus goal seasons, 22 this year, and they came in just 58 games. He was named to the All-Star game. There was some rumors leading up to the trade deadline this past season of teams being interested in Boone Jenner, but it was reported that the Blue Jackets do not want to trade Boone Jenner, and I think that makes sense. This is a team that, even with Boone Jenner on the roster and in the lineup, isn't very great, so if you take away their captain and one of their more consistent offensive producers, then watching Blue Jackets games would probably be a very scary sight, if it isn't already. Next up, we have the Dallas Stars, and for their best contract, I'm going to go with Jason Robertson, who signed for 2 more seasons at a cap hit of $7.75 million. Compared to last year, where he put up 100-plus points, I guess you could say this season Robertson had a bit of a down year. He definitely started slow, but still was able to finish with 29 goals and 80 points. And listen, if 80 points is considered a down year, I think you're doing just fine. Jason Robertson is a beast, an all-around player. He can create chances off the rush, off the cycle. He's a threat to shoot and pass, and in my opinion, he has a pretty underrated two-way game as well. The Red Wings are up next, and unfortunately, it's a lot easier to pick out bad contracts on this roster currently than good ones, but for their best contract, I think I gotta go with Jake Wallman, who has 2 years left at a cap hit of just $3.4 million. Over these last couple of seasons, Jake Wallman has really broke out with the Red Wings and established himself as a very solid two-way top 4 defenseman. Fantastic skater, has an absolute cannon of a shot, scored double digits in goals this season for the first time in his career. He finished with 12. I can confidently say Jake Wallman is easily the second best defenseman on the Red Wings roster behind Moritz Seider, and I think at times over these last couple of years he's been outperforming Seider. So $3.4 million for the next 2 seasons for a guy like Jake Wallman, I think the Red Wings are getting really good value, especially when you compare his cap hit to, some of the other cap hits on the Red Wings blue line like Justin Hall or Ben Sherratt. Moving along now, next up we have the Edmonton Oilers, and this is an easy one for me. It's got to be Zach Hyman, right? 4 years left at a cap hit of just $5.5 million, a contract that when it was initially signed was heavily criticized, and I think the majority of people thought that this was too much money for too long for a guy like Zach Hyman, who in Toronto had been more of a complimentary player. But man, has Zach Hyman ever proved a lot of people wrong, and not only has this contract aged really well, I think this signing could go down as one of the best free agent signings in NHL history. Hyman has been an absolute goal-scoring machine as a member of the Edmonton Oilers, especially this season, finishing with 54 in 80 games, obviously a career high for him. And it hasn't just been the regular season either where Zach Hyman has been productive. He has been a big-time playoff performer throughout his 3 seasons with the Oilers so far as well. Say what you want about how Zach Hyman scores his goals, backdoor tap-ins, deflections, rebounds, it doesn't matter because they all count the same, and Zach Hyman truly has perfected his role with the Edmonton Oilers. Continuing on now, next up we have the Florida Panthers, and my pick for their best contract is Gustav Forsling, who next season will be entering the first year of an 8-year contract that carries an annual cap hit of just $5.75 million. Over these last few seasons, Forsling has blossomed in seemingly out of nowhere to a legit two-way beast of a top 4 defenseman. He's a guy who can do a little bit of everything, very active in his own end, fantastic skater, really good gap control. He's got a sneaky good shot as well. He's scored double digits in goals in each of the last 3 seasons, and I'm not one to put a whole lot of stock into the plus-minus stat, but Gustav Forsling finished this season a league-leading plus 56. When the number is that outrageous, I feel like it's at least worth mentioning. Safe to say Gustav Forsling is doing pretty damn well for himself for a guy who was just claimed off of waivers by the Florida Panthers a little over 3.5 years ago. Moving along now to the Los Angeles Kings, my pick for their best contract, I can tell you who it's not. It's not Pierre-Luc Dubois. It's Trevor Moore, who has 4 years left at a cap of just $4.2 million. Trevor Moore is coming off of a career year with LA, led the team in goals with 31, put up a career high 57 points, played all 82 games. Very versatile player. Trevor Moore is one of those guys where you can slot him in on the fourth line or the first line, doesn't matter. He is going to be effective in each role. He's fast, he's pesky, really good forechecker, and plays a very responsible 200-foot game as well. Speaking of responsible 200-foot game, my pick for the best contract on the Minnesota Wild is definitely centerman Joel Eriksson-Ek, who has 5 years left at a cap of just $5.25 million. I think that is one of the absolute best contracts in the entire league. Eriksson-Ek has continued to improve offensively year after year, 3 consecutive 20-plus goal seasons, including a career-high 30 goals this past season. And although he hasn't won one yet, I'm going to go out on a limb and say before his career comes to an end, Joel Eriksson-Ek is going to have a Selke trophy to his name. Moving on now, next up we have the Montreal Canadiens, and for their best contract, I'm going to go with another guy who I think has the potential to win a Selke at some point in his career, Nick Suzuki, who has 6 years left at a cap of $7.875 million. Suzuki took a big step forward this season, put up career highs across the board, goals, assists, and points, played in all 82 games for the third consecutive season, still played a really strong 200-foot game, and what impressed me most about Suzuki this season was his ability to make others around him better. When Slafkovsky got put on that top line with Suzuki and Caulfield, that's when he really started to pop off. Suzuki is a guy who was named the youngest captain in Montreal Canadiens franchise history. That is a lot of pressure playing in such a big market like Montreal, and I think Suzuki has done a really good job so far. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators, and for their best contract, I definitely have to go with Ryan O'Reilly, who has 3 years left at a cap of just $4.5 million. O'Reilly finished second on the Predators in goals this past season with 26, and fourth on the team in points with 69. Still one of the better two-way centermen in the league, and definitely played a massive role in why the Nashville Predators surprised so many people this past season and had a good year and made the playoffs. It's only been one season, but I think we can already say pretty confidently that Ryan O'Reilly is one of the best free agent signings of the class of 2023. Nashville did really well here. Moving along now to the New Jersey Devils, my pick for their best contract is definitely Jack Hughes, who has 6 years left at a cap of $8 million, which is one of the higher cap hits of all the players we're going to talk about in this video. But for a guy like Jack Hughes, I think that contract already looks like a steal. He is one of the best young stars in the entire NHL. I think if he stays healthy, this is a guy with the potential to be a perennial 100-plus point player. Already one of the best centermen in the league, and I think it's going to stay that way for the next, 10-plus years. And having a guy like that locked up this kind of contract really bodes well for the New Jersey Devils' future. If he was up for an extension, say, after last season, his cap hit would probably have came in around the $11 or $12 million range. The Islanders are up next, and this was a bit of a tough one. I decided to go with Noah Dobson, although he does only have 1 year left, and term definitely plays a factor in what makes a contract good or bad, but 1 year, $4 million for Noah Dobson, that is an absolute bargain. This is a guy who, over these last 2 seasons, has blossomed into a legit #1 defenseman for the Islanders. A career high 60 assists and 70 points this past season for Noah Dobson in 79 games, one of the best power play quarterbacks in the league, and you can bet he's going to be in for a very, very large raise next offseason. The New York Rangers are up next, and for their best contract, I'm going to go with Vincent Trocheck, who has 5 years left at a cap hit of a little over $5.6 million. It's only been 2 seasons, but this free agent signing has already aged very well for the New York Rangers. Trocheck is coming off of a career year, 52 assists, career high, 77 points, career high, and although it didn't end the way the New York Rangers would have liked, Vincent Trocheck was a beast during their playoff run as well. 20 points in 16 games, some massive game-winning goals, and over these last 2 seasons, he has quickly developed some really nice chemistry with Artemi Panarin. Vincent Trocheck has fit in like a glove with the Rangers, and a cap of under $6 million for how productive he's been, I think, is a very good deal for the Rangers. The Ottawa Senators are up next, and for their best contract, I'm definitely going to go with Drake Batherson, who signed for 3 more seasons at a cap hit of just under $5 million. Batherson has scored 20-plus goals now in back-to-back seasons, including a career-high 28 this past season, which was second on the Senators, only behind Brady Tkachuk. Batherson is a guy who's probably not going to drive an entire line on his own, but he's going to finish plays. He has a great shot, really effective on the power play, and for under $5 million a season, you can't go wrong. The Philadelphia Flyers are up next, and I decided to go with Travis Konechny as their best contract. I tried to shy away from picking too many guys with just 1 year left, but for the Flyers, I think Konechny is the best value. 1 year left at a cap of just $5.5 million. He's been their best and most consistent forward for a few seasons now. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with Konechny, heading into the final year of his contract. Is he going to be trade bait? Are they going to sign him to a long-term extension? Whatever ends up happening, I think the Flyers are going to be well off for it, because if you trade him with this team friendly of a cap hit, you're probably probably going to get a massive haul in return. And if you sign him to a long-term extension, then you have a guy locked up who's going to be a big piece for your team. And if they do sign him to an extension, I could see Konechny being the next captain of the Philadelphia Flyers. Moving on now to the Pittsburgh Penguins, we have another guy here with just 1 year left on his deal, but I mean, come on, their best contract, Sidney Crosby, 1 year left, a cap of just $8.7 million, and Sidney Crosby at 36 years old is still one of the absolute best players in the league, had one of the best stretches of his entire career to close out this past season, tried to do everything in his power to drag this Pittsburgh Penguins team to the playoffs, kicking and screaming. It came up short, but another amazing regular season from Crosby, and because of the fact that Crosby has just 1 year left on his deal, and it doesn't look like the Penguins are going to be competing for another cup anytime soon, it's led to some trade speculation surrounding Crosby. I haven't really indulged because I just cannot see him playing anywhere other than Pittsburgh, but I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. I think whatever happens with Crosby, a lot of it is going to depend upon how the Penguins look, the first half of next season. The San Jose Sharks are up next, and it's a bit of a tough one because they don't really have a whole lot of guys signed long term, but for their best contract, I decided to go with defenseman Mario Ferraro, 2 years left at a cap of $3.25 million. Ferraro has played top pairing minutes on a brutal San Jose Sharks team for a couple of seasons now, and he's been at least competitive in that role. I think it's probably a safe bet to assume he'd do a lot better on a much better team, maybe, in second pair or bottom pairing minutes. And who knows, maybe he'll get an opportunity to do that sometime soon, because if the Sharks make him available for trade, I think there would at least be a handful of teams interested. Next up, we have the Seattle Kraken, and this one's easy for me. It's got to be Jared McCann, 3 years left at a cap of just $5 million. His production came back down to earth a little bit this season after scoring a career high 40 goals and 70 points last season, but still finished with 29 goals this season. That's now 25 plus goals and leading the Seattle Kraken in points all 3 years of their existence. Just a really solid, well-rounded top six forward who is lethal on the power play, and a cap of $5 million for the next 3 years I think is an absolute bargain for the Kraken. Moving along now to the St. Louis Blues, I decided to go with Pavel Buchnevich as their best contract. 1 year left at a cap of $5.8 million, and it's kind of similar to what I said about Travis Konechny. Like, Buchnevich was a guy we heard a lot about leading up to this year's trade deadline. He didn't end up getting traded, but whatever happens with him, I think Blues fans are probably going to end up being pretty happy in the end, because if you trade Buchnevich, 1 year left on his contract, a very team-friendly cap, you're probably going to get a massive haul in return, and if you sign him to an extension, well, you're getting back a guy who's going to be a massive part of your team for a long time. Buchnevich is really underrated in my opinion. This guy is a legit top-line forward, capable of scoring 30-plus goals and being around a point per game in a single season, and I think he has a really underrated two-way game as well. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and for their best contract, I'm going with Brandon Hagel, who has 8 years left at a cap of $6.5 million. Brandon Hagel put up a career-high 75 points this past season in 82 games, following a season in which he scored a career-high 30 goals in 81 games. Hagel has been lights out so far as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is a guy who's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He does a little bit of everything. He's fast, he's a good forechecker, pushes play in the right direction, effective on the penalty kill, and I guess he's kind of similar to Zach Hyman in the sense where, he may not be the focal point, of a team's offense, and he may not drive a line all by himself, but he is the perfect kind of player to pair with a superstar. And at just 25 years old, Hagel's really just hitting his peak now, and this 8-year contract means Tampa's going to have him locked up for all the best years of his career. Really solid value here for Tampa Bay, a team where you get a lot of guys making big bucks, you got to save money where you can, and I think this Brandon Hagel contract is a bargain for the Lightning. Next up, we have the Maple Leafs, and this is a bit of a tough one. They obviously have a lot of guys making big bucks. For their best contract, I decided to go with Joseph Woll. 1 year left at, a little over $770,000. I think Joseph Woll is going to be the starting goaltender for the Maple Leafs next season, unless they make a big move to acquire a goaltender over the offseason. This is a guy who has been very good in pretty much every stint he's had at the NHL level. It's a small sample size, only 39 regular season games and a cup of tea in the playoffs. The thing with Joseph Woll is he just has to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy and the Leafs can go out and get a veteran goaltender who's capable of being, kind of a 1B, maybe start, 40 games a season and Joseph Woll starts 42, something like that, then I think their goaltending situation would be in really good shape. But currently with Joseph Woll and his injury history and having Samsonov, who was really inconsistent this past season and just you never knew what to expect, it kind of leaves a pretty big question mark in net for the Leafs. Moving along now to Utah. Almost forgot them. This is the first one from every team video I've done since they relocated, but my pick for the best contract on Utah is Connor Ingram. 2 years left at a cap of just $1.95 million. Ingram's numbers dropped off quite a bit towards the end of this past season, but still finished with very respectable respectable numbers as a whole: 23, 21, and 3, a 907 save percentage, and a 17.68 goal saved above expected. Just imagine what Ingram's numbers would have looked like, and really what the Coyotes' season could have looked like. Maybe they could have been pushing for a wildcard spot had they not gone through that disastrous, 13-game losing streak. The Vancouver Canucks are up next, and this is a really easy one. It's going to be the captain, Quinn Hughes, 3 years left at a cap hit of just $7.85 million. In my opinion, that is one of the biggest bargain deals in the entire NHL. Quinn Hughes took a massive step this season and really solidified himself as one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He very well may end up winning the Norris Trophy, finished with 92 points in 82 games, and aside from the crazy offensive production, his defensive game drastically improved this season as well. Just an unbelievable season from Quinn Hughes. He really took his game to just a whole other level, and I'll be honest, he took it to a level that I didn't really think he was capable of taking his game to, and I think Vancouver's team success was a big reflection of that as well. The Vegas Golden Knights are up next, and I'm going to go with Shea Theodore as their best contract. Just 1 year left, but a cap hit of $5.2 million for Shea Theodore is an absolute steal. I'm very curious to see what the Golden Knights decide to do with, their cap situation over the next year or so with Shea Theodore. Can't imagine they're going to want to let him walk to unrestricted free agency, but in order to sign him to an extension, especially after bringing in guys like Hurdle and then Hannafin and signing Hannafin to that extension, they're going to have to clear cap somewhere, which is a situation that the Golden Knights often find themselves in, so I'm sure they'll figure it out somehow. Moving along now, next up we have the Washington Capitals, and for their best contract, I'm definitely going with Dylan Strome. 4 years left at a cap hit of $5 million. Strome really has turned out to be a fantastic signing for the Capitals. They picked him up on a 1-year deal after he wasn't qualified by the Blackhawks, had a very strong first season with the Caps, 23 goals, 65 points, earned himself a nice 5-year, $25 million extension, and it's an extension that already looks like a really solid deal for the Caps. Strome finished second on the Capitals in goals this season with 27, only behind Ovechkin, and finished first on the team in points with 67, which is a new career high for Strome. And now finally, finishing out the video with the last team, the Winnipeg Jets, and for their best contract, I definitely think it has to be Josh Morrissey. 4 years left at a cap hit of just $6.25 million, a contract that, at the start looked like it might not age very well for the Jets, but over these last few seasons, Josh Morrissey has really broken out and established himself as a true number one defenseman. Morrissey finished 5th in Norris Trophy voting last season when he finished with 76 points in 78 games, kind of out of nowhere, and a lot of people figured, that maybe an outlier season for Morrissey. He's probably not going to be able to sustain that kind of production, and his numbers did take a bit of a step back this season, 6 less goals and 7 less points, but still very strong numbers with 69 points in 81 games. His defensive game isn't the greatest, but that's why he's paired with somebody like Dylan DeMello, and those two guys made up one of the absolute best D pairings in the entire league this past season. So that is going to wrap up today's video going over the best contract currently from all 32 NHL teams. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if you disagree with any of my picks, be sure to let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. If you guys enjoy these one from every team videos and you want more on the channel in the future, then be sure to leave this video a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all again soon.